Alleluia. Om Mani Padme Om. Allah Satnam.
Welcome. You're watching Harmony University, and we're speaking with Dr. Jayant Bapat. He's an academic at Monash University and a Hindu priest. And we spoke to you last week, Doctor, and thank you very much for coming back in. Now, you mentioned in last week's interview the fact that you had 3,000 years of Hindu history, and that you had to be born a Hindu, that you couldn't become one.
Yes.
And you mentioned a whole lot of different sects and 3,500 years of history. Could you start to wind that together with the key points of Hinduism?
Yeah, sure. The first thing that I would like to say is Hinduism is non-prophetic.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, it's the teaching of not one person, but thousands of seers.
Yes.
Over many hundreds of years, thousands of years.
Mm.
And as a result, it's a conglomeration of quite a few different beliefs together.
Mm.
Good thing about it is it's fairly inclusive, so it's quite happy with just about anything under the sun.
Mm. Mm.
By the same token, it can also become very unwieldy.
Yes.
And there are so many sects and so many different worships there. The good thing, once again, is we recognize that there is a male god and there is a female god who are both of equal importance.
Mm-hmm.
And this we have taken literally, in the sense there are people in India, in areas where they will worship only the goddess.
Yes.
Bengal, for instance, in Orissa, East India, they will worship the goddess Durga. In my parts, for instance, Ganesh, the remover of obstacles, is the most important god. And in most parts of India now, Shiva, the destroyer and therefore recreator of universe, and Vishnu, the maintainer of universe, they are the important gods. So as a result, we have three main streams within Hinduism: Shaivism, which is worship of Shiva; Vaishnavism, worship of Vishnu; and Shaktism, which is worship of the goddess.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, Hinduism consisted of village Indians, still does. And villages have lots and lots of different gods and goddesses.
Yeah.
They're all assimilated into the main Hinduism, Brahminic Hinduism.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, we got literally hundreds and thousands of gods and goddesses.
Yes.
But the Brahmins and the literate people will see them as manifestations of the same ultimate gods.
Yeah.
So we got a kind of Trinity as well. But anyway, we have got lots of different sects, and depends on where you are in India, a particular god would be important.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned before that there is the male god and female god, and they are both important because people in India realize right from the villages, that's where it came from, the village India, that is the union of male and female that produces the next offspring. And so that's the nearest we can go to godhood, isn't it? Because God is the one who produces humans and the rest of the world. So the nearest thing to our going to God is male and female sexual relationship. And therefore, Hinduism has put sex on a pedestal. Sex is called divine sex. So we got to emulate what Shiva, one of the gods, and his wife Uma or Parvati emulate their behavior, and they are considered the mother and father of the world. So we got to emulate them. But by the same token, how can we reach them? And you might have heard about a lot these days about Tantra.
Yes.
Tantra basically is worshipping that element of the union of male and female, the Shiva and Shakti, to reach a stage of not sexual happiness, but something much past that.
Yes.
Which is called, in Buddhism is called nirvana, in Hinduism is called moksha, and that is the basis of Tantra, which has been unfortunately misunderstood in the West.
Yes.
But that is how we worship Shiva as the phallus.
Mm.
The goddess is also worshipped as the female generative organ, and the villagers will do this without knowing that they are doing a fairly complex abstract worship.
Yes.
But that's what Tantra is.
Mm.
And Shiva worship is so prevalent in India, and so is goddess worship. But people do this without realizing, but only the sexual bit and these bits were taken by the West and turned saucy.
Yes,
And that is what Tantra unfortunately has got a bad name in there. But it's very fundamental. It's going past the orgasmic experience to an experience of joy forever, and which is the male and female union. And that is what Tantra is. So here in Melbourne, for instance, we got big Durga temple, the goddess temple. We got Shiva temple, we got Vishnu temples, and people worship all of these.
So it's small c Catholic is actually one of the strong points of
Indeed,
Hinduism.
yes,
Indeed.
Yes.
So it's actually it's the passage to the sublime, isn't it?
Passage to sublime. Yes. That's what sex creates, should create, because that's what the father and mother of the world, they produce the universe, and they live in ultimate eternal bliss, and that's what we got to emulate. Yes.
And at a village level, how far does that roll over into sort of the agrarian reality of crops and trees and growing? And
interesting you ask that, because people don't realize, but for instance, they do this because it has been done by their forefathers for generations. But when they, for instance, example is a festival in Bengal, called Ambuvachi. Now this festival happens just after the rains. So the rains, earth is considered the earth mother. So she is the mother. She produces the offspring, which is the crop.
Yes.
And so she needs to be impregnated by the seed, and the seed is provided by the rain. So therefore, at the time when this happens, when it rains, you are not supposed to use any implements to make sure that she remains in that expectant stage. And so this is the philosophy behind this wonderful festival, but people do that they don't know this. They may know it, some of them, but they will practice that as something that has been done for generations, and therefore they...
Yeah, it's quite amazing, and of course generations are in fact time, and we're out of that, so we'll be back in a moment.
Mani Allah, Alleluia, Mani Allah.
Welcome back. You're watching Harmony University, and we're speaking with Dr. Jayant Bapat. He's an academic at Monash University and a Hindu priest. Now that's fascinating. The more we go into Hinduism, the more complex it becomes. But for all of those different sects and different village practices, there's ceremonies and rituals. What are some of the main ones that come out of that?
Yes, the worship of any god is called a puja. And puja basically means that you are assuming that the god or goddess has come to your place as a welcome guest. So what happens in India is, being a hot country, when someone comes to, especially in village India, when someone comes to your place, you give them water to wash their feet, wash their hands. You say, come inside and please sit down. Then you give them some water to drink, just to make sure they are not dehydrated. Then you feed them, you give them clothes and a bit of money so that they will look after themselves, and then you say goodbye to them. So basically that is what a puja consists of. These are all Sanskrit mantras, or they could be in villages, they don't have Sanskrit mantras, but they could be saying the same thing in their language. And to the god, come and sweeten my house, be comfortable, have this food, and then we'll eat the rest of the food, assuming that you have eaten some of it. So it's a prasad, it's called. So it's something from God that we obtain. And then we bid you goodbye and come back to bless us when we seek your blessings. So gods come to your place, then except for the exception is temple, of course. The god has got to be there 24/7.
24/7. Yeah.
And he is done, there's a special worship done to make sure that he takes human form and has eyes and he can hear, he can see, he or she once again. So he is there in human form all the time.
Right.
And so the temple gods are different. Also the gods who look after your house are different, the god who does that, because he has got to be there 24/7.
24/7 as
So
well.
the worship for that is quite different. And you actually instill life in them by special mantras.
Right.
Whereas the normal pujas, worships are come to our place, bless us, and then go back to your home in skies. So that's how worships takes place. On special occasions, since gods have taken human form, incarnations, we believe in, that's something we haven't discussed. Incarnations are just like God decides every now and then that there's too much of sin on this earth, so they incarnate themselves in human form somewhere, and they will make sure that the world behaves and goes the right way, and their job will be finished for that incarnation. So similarly, what happens is when they incarnate, they are called something or the other. So there are various incarnations of Vishnu. So they are worshipped in those temples. So Rama is one of the examples.
Yes.
So Rama and his wife Sita would be worshipped in those temples. Vishnu and Lakshmi, his wife, the goddess of wealth, will be worshipped in those temples. Or on special occasions, we have something like close to 200 or 300 days. So basically every day you can worship someone or the other. And there are very special days on which you have special worships and for a particular god. So you either go to the temple or invite them at home. So that's how normal worships are conducted.
Right. So just going back to the fact of the permanent presence of the particular deity, there's a lot of parallels with that, say, with Christianity and the permanent presence of Jesus.
Yes.
How does that, is there any sort of comfortable interface with Christianity in India on that point?
No, unfortunately not, simply because, well, people have tried, I must say. But you might have heard of B.D. Griffiths.
Yes.
Who is a great priest, and he tried to combine Hinduism with Christianity.
Yes.
John Dupuis here has tried to combine Tantra with, and he has written a book on Christian Tantra.
Yes.
Now, those kinds of things do exist, but what happens in India is there's a lot of ill feeling towards Christian with the Hindus anyway, because I can't blame the Christian priests. Their whole idea is to convert people, because that's what, and Islam, same thing. Yes, that they're supposed to do what they are doing. Right. Whereas that's something, of course, Hindus won't like, and people are being converted by giving them food and shelter and so on. So that's something that jars with Hindus.
Yes.
And so there's no interface as such. Of course, there are a lot of interfaith places which have interfaith seminars. That happens all over Australia as well. But this aspect of it is not very much appreciated back in India.
Yes, there's been some violence over that, hasn't there?
Indeed, yes. Once again, in Bengal and so on, the Orissa priests have been burnt and so on. Very unfortunate. There is an extreme element of Hindus, and any religion would have that, and they have tried to make sure that this doesn't happen. But the only answer to that is, if you don't like what the Christians are doing, you feed your people, and then they won't convert. But that's so.
That's the other side of the story. That's right. Yeah, so you've got these celebrations now. When one of the deities materializes in human form, is that always recognized? It's always announced, or do they come and go without being recognized?
For instance, right now, start of it is today.
Right.
The Ganesh, the elephant-headed god, has his festival on now. And if you go to Indian households in here, I don't eat at my place for the next 15 days. I go to someone's place in the evening, and they will have this special worship, and then they will feed you. And that happens now. It's happening for the last 12 years. I'm doing a worship at Darabin Council Hall.
Oh, yes.
And actually, it's the Christians who started that. It's wonderful. This guy was in Mumbai for 6 months and he loved that so much, the Ganesh festival. We asked someone, can you do it here? And we're doing it here now.
Oh, fantastic.
That happens next Saturday. Next Sunday, there would be same installation and worship of Ganesh at very big race course. So,
well, it involves all sorts of action and time as well, which we're out of. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Dr. Jayant Bapat. We were speaking about Hinduism in all of its various forms in India particularly, but there's a large diaspora of Indians in Australia.
yes.
And I think Hindus and Sikhs would be the main versions of those. Of course, you wrote a book in conjunction with a couple of other people. Tell us a bit about that, because let's look at what Indian diaspora looks like in Australia.
Yeah. Well, people don't realize that Hindus, Sikhs especially, came here very early in the piece with the white conviction settlers.
Yes.
And this happened, not many of them, but this happened because they were traveling on ships where they were ran the engine room, or they were servants on rich people who came on ships, etc. Or they were imported here by the church, some of them. That was the beginning, but in a major way they came when Australia wanted some kind of transport mechanism in Central Australia and top end. And the only thing that was possible were camels. So the cameliers, who are not Hindus and Sikhs, they are Muslims, but they came in a big way. And as you know, camels are wild camels now in Australia. Yes, in those areas. Yes, but that was the very first migration, very small migration, but first migration. The next bit came with the indentured labor, and they were Indians from all over place, and mostly Hindus, who came to sugarcane plantations in Fiji and everywhere, who came to at the time of gold rush as hawkers. And these people were forced, of course, to go back within a couple of years. They were treated very inhumanely, and those who died here were buried. That's quite interesting, because Hindus must be cremated, but cremation wasn't allowed that time. So there were burials, and there are tombs of Hindus here, and a few of them in Victoria, one in Hamilton, one in Dunkeld, and so on. So the poor fellows had to be buried, because that was the only thing that was possible. So that was then when I came around that time, the only migration was possible, and to some extent was professionals, academics, doctors, and business people. So they used to come sporadic. Finally, when the Whitlam government completely removed the White Australia policy, this would be 1972. From 75 onwards, a big influx of Indians came, and they have been the IT people, engineers, professionals, and so on. So they are about, and then the last stage, of course, is students, when Australia realized that a lot of money is to be made by students coming from overseas, and they have with some unfortunate results, I must say, but on the whole, this is the migration patterns of Indians, and most Indians are Hindus, so Hindus in Australia, and Sikhs. But it's the Sikhs who have actually made the presence felt here much more, because they are extremely hardworking, and they were country towns. They would go and sell things to the people who were gold diggers, and their families and so on. So they became very popular here, and there's a big history, written history of Sikhs in Australia. So that's how we wrote this book about the migration of Indians in 4 or 5 stages, how they are settled, and most Hindus are, as we discussed before, are fairly open. They have no problems marrying amongst the Christians here or others in here. So they have settled very well, and most of the people that exist here now would be professional Indians, majority in IT, then some engineers and so on.
Yes, of course the Sikhs have by their dress are very conspicuous as well.
They are. Yes.
Then there's Gurdwaras, Sikh temples here.
Yes. Quite a few of them.
Yes, there are. So with the Indian children, the children of Indians that are born in Australia,
Yes.
how does that work? Are they tied to Indian tradition, or do they tend to become much more Australian?
They are very much Australian. Indians, like any other migrant population, are doing their best to make sure that they inculcate some values and some heritage things for these kids. It's hard because unless the population reaches a certain critical mass, many things won't happen.
Yes.
And in some cases we have reached that mass when there are more temples coming up and so on. But as a rule, the kids are, for instance, marrying non-Indians quite often.
Yes.
And to me it's a good thing, it's a great thing. If you want to assimilate and produce this great multicultural experiment,
That's right.
there's no point in Indians marrying other Indians and so on.
That's right.
So, yes, but Indian parents do worry. For instance, most kids will not speak their own language in spite of the parents speaking that at home. Eventually they'll just go into English or Australian. Australian, yes.
That's right.
So, yes, but as I said, that's great assimilation and they're quite happy. How far they keep the culture depends on, like any other community. I don't know whether the Italian community here is much different to the Italian community back home. They probably are.
Yes.
So
Yes. That's right, and it's critical for Australia that the young people do become assimilated.
Sure thing. Yes.
But it's also because Australia, with food, for example, the changes in food that Indian culture has brought here.
Yes.
Do you find that there's any restaurants which actually reflect India in a very special way, without naming them, but to promote them?
Most of the restaurants that came originally came from the Punjabi style of food, which is from North India. There are some South Indian restaurants opening here now. So slowly the whole picture is emerging. Temples, as a rule, have South Indian food with them. So there will be a restaurant there which will sell South Indian food.
You know, we're going to have to stop now. That's good because our gastric juices are flowing, as well as our intellectual juices, which is terrific. Dr. Jayant, thank you so much for coming and covering a very interesting and extensive subject.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've been watching Harmony in Diversity. We'll be back next week. Thanks for watching.
Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om.